I want to run a successful firm. I want to be profitable. I want to be growing. However, to me, it's more about what impact did we make, not only internally, but on our customers and just their experience. And we're creating homes for people, and that's where they're living with their families and just escaping the craziness of the world, right? At the end of the day, if we can make that impact a positive one for people, like that's really what matters.
Well, I'm very excited for the podcast today. Welcome, Kirsten.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, Brad. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So, Kirsten Holmstedt, you are owner and founder, CEO of Treasured in the Detail, and we've known each other for a long time. You've done some powerful
Yep.
things in the industry. We just finished an incredible home.
Yeah.
They
Worth the
like,
wait project. Woo! That
yes,
was
worth the wait. You talk about worth the wait. It really was. I mean, you absolutely hit a home run with that project. And you know what, I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I think what truly sets designers apart, and I'll give you some credit here, is, every client has a budget, and some clients, again, nothing with this client, but I'm just saying every client has a budget. And for
Mhm.
what our square foot cost was to build that house to what you designed is extremely impressive, because it looks like it should have been double the cost. So kudos to you,
Sure.
because it takes
Well,
a lot of
thank
talent to
you.
put that
Yeah.
together and still be cost effective.
Well, we have an incredible team. I definitely can't do it alone, and I'm excited to talk more about that today as well. But thank you. Yeah, it was a huge partnership, and I give your team 100% credibility too, and just all the players that were involved to really bring that one home. So,
Well, it's great. Excited to have you on. So again,
yeah.
for you, I think you have a unique background, Kirsten. I mean,
Mhm.
as you look at your career, you've had corporate training. You're
Mhm.
in a creative business. These two operations mentalities typically don't coincide. And
Yeah.
probably the real successful
Yeah.
ones are able to do that.
Mhm.
So from your background going into design, how has that played a role?
Yeah, so I would love to talk a little bit about that because my background did start quite different, and I'm so grateful for it because I do feel like it really set the foundation for how I operate my business today. But just a little bit, so I have more of a business background, so I went through business school. I actually majored in supply chain management and marketing. So after I graduated, I went off and worked for Intel for about 10 years. So really, really different industry. And while I was there, I was certified in Lean Six Sigma training, and I'll talk about that a little bit today and how I've used that lens for building my business. But like I said, I'm really grateful for that background and that experience. But I knew my passion, wasn't necessarily there. And so while I was enjoying a sabbatical with Intel, I had started really designing my own home and just really finding so much immense joy in doing, going through that. And it kind of took a leap of faith. I mean, it took about 8 months for me to get it going, but I left about 12 years ago and I've never looked back. But again, so grateful for the foundation. But I would say, I didn't leave, and I mean, learned so much structure at Intel, and I didn't leave Intel because I was trying to escape structure. What I
Hmm.
found is I really brought the structure to my business so that I could protect that creativity and really do what I love and bring that to my team. So I think it was the laying foundational blocks that really got me to start this business, and kind of come in with a different lens. Yes, I have a different background. Most designers start their business with a design degree,
Hmm.
and that's not necessarily the path I took. But I feel like that really has helped set the foundation and the success that we're seeing today. So,
That's amazing. When you think about structure, that word, for say someone listening, as they think about what that means to them, what are maybe some structural things that you learned in your role or that Intel did that helped you be successful when you were at Intel? Of
mhm.
course, maybe some of those same practices you brought into your firm.
Yeah. So I love structure. I really do. I think it's just how my brain works. I know a lot of people are, left brain, right brain, but I think for me, I'm really, that's just absolutely has to be in place for me to have that creative mindset. And so as I was in Intel, I mean, it's very strong around processes and cross-functional relationships and systems and just thinking efficiently, very heavy execution pressure, right? And so I think having that foundation at Intel really helped to set the tone of how I wanted to run my business differently. I'm always learning. Every day is a new day, and we're always continuously improving. But I think through Intel, it was a lot about the systems and the operations and how we would run our projects, because I was a project or operations manager at the time. And I went through something called Lean Six Sigma training, and I got certified. And that is something that my team will say, like, I'm always talking about, like, how do we map out our processes? How do, just yesterday. And I'm so proud of my team, because I feel like it's really starting to get integrated into the culture here. But, really understanding the processes, the day to day, and mapping those out. And the Lean Six Sigma lens Lean is all about reducing waste within your processes and improving speed. And Six Sigma is all about defect reduction and reducing variation. And so, avoiding or reducing rework as much as we
Hmm.
can. And so I think that's how I really approach my company and the day to day of, like, how do we continuously improve, through the systems that we have, through the collaborations that we have with our partners like you guys, and just making things really tightly operated so that we can really spend the proper time on the design side and really protect that creativity, and give the team that space to do their best work. But if you don't have strong systems in place, and I do see there's so many designers out there that are so successful, and it's not about the talent that they lack, it's about the operations and the lack of structure sometimes that they don't have in place, that can sometimes cause them to not be successul. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's
I
kind
love
of
it.
some of the things that I learned that's just so ingrained in they say when you leave in, or when you work at Intel, you bleed blue. And it's so true. I bled blue. I still do. I have clients that work at Intel, and I laugh, because we used to talk about things like ARs and action requireds, and I do a lot of that in my own company, and it's just hard not to break that. But it's really important to me that I brought that similar culture mindset to my own company, and I'm starting to see that in my own team as far as how they're approaching things, really thinking about, how do we avoid rework and how do we improve our processes every day. So it's been really cool and wild to see the full circle moment, if you will.
Well, it's funny you say AR is action required. I mean, as you're saying that, I'm thinking accounts receivable, like most of us, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do
Yeah.
we make sure we get those collections and, keep that business
Yeah.
operating? You made a
Totally.
comment. You said at Intel, you had what was called, you said execution pressure.
Hmm.
Define what that is. I mean, and maybe how it relates to now, because, I think of that maybe deadlines, maybe I'm off, but I think, the reality is, as a builder, like, we have really strong deadlines, right? Because that's where, the client, happiness, their satisfaction of us as a builder, schedule is a huge part of that. I know for you as a
Right.
designer, you have really
Yep.
strong deadlines you have to hit. I mean, there's commitments, there's a lot of parties involved. You're trying to, put together a lot of information. So,
Yeah.
what was that execution pressure at Intel? And then, of course, how, what's that execution pressure you deal with now?
Yeah. So, and this is where I feel like I felt that even though it was difficult during the time, I was so young in my Intel career, and I got, promoted rather quickly through the company. And I remember I was an operations manager at a young age, and I would always need to go to something called ramp ops, or, where you would kind of report out on behalf of your organization on things that we were causing the factory to be down for. Like, I was in supply chain management. So think about, there were parts that were missing for the tools to operate. And so our job was to really make sure, that all the supply chain was running smoothly in order to ensure the factory was able to meet their deadlines and make the products that were ultimately going to, hit the market and whatnot. So I think just that training of, I remember I used to walk down, I'd always call it like the walk of death, where I'd walk from like my building to the other building, where I would be in front of factory managers really high up in the company, and really be kind of saying, okay, here's where things are at. This is what we're doing about it. This is what we're going to put in place to ensure that we hit those deadlines. So I think it's similar today. We feel different pressures within the design, but it's so similar, right? It's how we approach our problem solving, how we're working with our partners, right? We're all working on tight deadlines. You have builds that, while they take a time to complete, if we're not doing our part and we're not delivering a clear spec book and within the time that's needed in order to get it bid properly and quoted, and then take it to that next level to really start construction, it's so important and crucial that we play that role to play a part in what I call that supply chain, but it really is. It's just like, how are all the players working together? And it's just really important that my team is continuously looking at how we're operating so that we're, not only delivering well for our client, who is our customer, but also we look to you guys as our customers, because you really need a really strong product and things on time in order to really execute properly. So that's what I mean with execution pressure always. So.
Well, what are some of the challenges you deal with, just from a design perspective? Do you find in most of these processes, like in the early on process, as you're going through design, are you struggling more with the builder? Are you struggling more with the architect, with the client? As far as, thinking about budget and selections and timeframes, like where do you find a lot of those challenges, in the early on conception?
Yeah, I mean, we work on such a wide range of projects that we're not solely just new builds. We do a combination here at Treasure in the Details. So we'll do large scale renovations. Sometimes we even do medium scale renovations or custom new builds. But it's all the same, right? I think what I've learned early on is it's so important to establish a budget with the client and the build partners early on. It might, I don't want to say slow the process down, but it does. It's a necessary step and we were just talking about this as a team yesterday, where the client might have a budget in mind, but, we're not really sure exactly what the design direction is going to be just yet. And so I think what's been a little challenging is just that budget expectation and alignment up front to ensure that, and I want to make sure that that's solid up front, so that as we continue through the design process, we are developing something that's going to help the client stay within their budget. So I think we learned early on that sometimes we would just design till the whole process, and then we'd get to the end and it was so far out of range, and you're value engineering at the end, and the client's unhappy, the builder's frustrated because they're behind, so I think early on we're now building that in, and we have a process in place where we're doing that more mindfully and strategically, and it slows things down a little bit in the beginning, and it's a little frustrating because we're like, we want to rock and roll, we want to get it to the end of the design. But I would say that part has been challenging, and we're really trying to figure out how to balance that, where the construction partner or the builder has enough information for the design direction, but they don't have all the details yet, but they can quote it enough properly to where it's close enough in range that we can continue forward confidently. Does that make sense? So I think that's one area that we've been seeing is hard, but it's a necessary evil.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Kirsten, because what's interesting about these checkpoints, or like data points, right, as you're going through the budget, is I've seen this happen two ways, right? So whether we weren't having these checkpoints during pre-con with our design team, and all of a sudden you present them the final price, and two things happen. The project dies because it's too expensive,
Yeah.
or they say, Brad, you didn't keep us up to speed. This is like, not that it's double, but it's way more than what we initially thought.
Sure.
Like, we're going to move. And what's funny about that, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I've been the recipient of that as well. What's funny is, I've had a couple clients come to me and they're like, well, look, we went through a year of pre-construction with this builder. And let's just say for easy math, they're $1,000 a square foot. Well, my price is $1,000 a square foot, but they just come to me because even though I'm the same price as probably this other guy, they're so exhausted from that year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I remember you talking about that in I think it was even in your, one of your talks that you had. I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've had the same way, where I had a project not too long ago that, again, and our fault, we should have done a better job of really staying up to speed with the design team. And by design team, I'm speaking architect and designer specifically, because there were a few tangents taken that we didn't know of until it's time for bid. And then all of a sudden we had the sticker shock as well, because we're like, hey, we didn't really budget for a few of these add-ons that went in. And what happened was the client was very upset, and they ended up picking a builder, like moving from us after we had this relationship for 18 months. And they were actually $20 a square foot more. So they're actually a little bit more than me.
Sure.
But it's just, but it goes to that point, is that when you think about these processes, like it can be exhausting, and sometimes we hurt ourselves by just, delivering the bad news early, or at least, hey, this is where we're at. Do we want to keep going this direction, or do we want to pivot and, value engineer?
Yeah. And such a good point. And I'm glad we're not alone. I feel like, what are we, are we the only ones dealing with this? But it's just like I learned early on, like there were so many times that it was just like you don't, it just happens, and it's a tough conversation. But like you just said, it's better to have everyone aligned and feel confident, and it's just going to deliver a better ultimate experience for the client, but it's also going to be successful for the rest of the parties that are involved, right? So it's a hard challenge, and I don't think you'll ever perfect it, because it is difficult to really hone that budget in early on without all the specifics ironed out just yet. But I think it's so important to get it clear as much as possible so that everybody can move forward confidently. And then when you do finally, do all the final bidding, it's within reason, and they're expecting that range, right? And so I think that, it's always a constant learning, but I think that, I know we've learned a lot, and I think it's helped for sure. So.
Well, I know that maybe speak to this, because I know as far as when we worked together, Kirsten, you did a great job of, we kind of had these data points as well, right? As we're looking at cabinetry together, kind of budgeting that together, working through some of the vendors that we're both using, for probably best pricing. So it allows you a little bit more flexibility with maybe some upgrades or nicer product because of competitive, purchase power that we both have.
Yeah.
How, as you look at your business today, how much more comfortable are you with the budgets going into it to understand how much things cost? And what I mean by that, like, a lot of times the clients may bring in a Pinterest picture, but if you have T&G throughout the whole house, if you have, a lot of wall trim, all these different elements add to that cost. How do you feel when you're going into these budgets to know the project is realistic and you can even work within the confines?
Yeah. I definitely feel like I've learned over time. I mean, that just naturally happens through experience and just having enough of these tough conversations. But I'm also big on data, and as we go through these projects, just really kind of keeping almost like a database of how much did this on average cost. And while we might not be the one quoting that particular piece, it's really important for us to collect that information so that we can speak with education to the client up front and say, is this realistic or not? So I'm having those conversations early on during the consultations. We have a budget guide that we actually have prepared for our clients, just to give them an overview of, ranges that things can fall, even to the level of detail that you're talking about with T&G, or, some other factors that they want to incorporate into their home, and how much to expect for different types of things. It might not be 100%, but at least gives them a range. And then again, we're just constantly checking in with our partners too, and having those conversations. Is this realistic? And so I think it's something that I've learned over time and to become more comfortable with, but it was not easy at first. That's for sure. So, yeah.
As you look at your operations and processes, what should a designer do, or what should they know, early on to set those expectations?
So you mean like for the client, or for?
Yeah, maybe it's timeline. Maybe it's, your internal operation, how things process, so that it'll be a successful design experience for them.
Yeah. So we're really, like I said, we're really big on process. And so we definitely have clear, deliverables, milestones kind of outlined within our documents that we share with our clients. So we're kind of going over that at every step of the process early on when I meet with them for the consultation. And then I feel, we were talking about this yesterday as a team, but sometimes it can take upwards of 6 times to repeat something to someone for them to really understand it. So just having it well documented in all of our different steps and communications. We outline, every step of the way, where we do a kickoff meeting and we go through it entirely with them and the design team. And then at every presentation point, we also are repeating almost those same deliverables and what to expect next, and here's what we need from you at this point, just so that they're constantly aware of what's coming, and they can really you never want a client guessing, right, of where we're at in the process, or what to be expecting. Another thing we do is we also provide weekly snapshots in our communications to our client on, like, what are we working on right now? What's coming up next? What do we need from you in order to move forward successfully? And then, so I think that's been really helpful that we've instituted into the programs that we use to communicate with our clients. So I think it's just, again, being really clear in your communications and your documentation at every step of the process so that the client knows what to expect, and they're never guessing on what's next, and they just feel cared for. And it also just keeps everybody aligned and held accountable to kind of ensure that that experience is successful. So
Yeah, that's
I would say
amazing.
that's important for us for sure.
From the design perspective, as you are working with all kinds of builders throughout the process,
Mm,
how do you factor in your cost and time? And what I mean by that is, I'd imagine some builders, are not going to absorb all your time once they go into vertical construction. Some do.
mhm.
How do you try to, you may have an anticipation going into it, but how do you
Yeah.
communicate with the client to let them know the involvement you're going to need to have depending on,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
end builder selection?
This one's a little bit tricky because I've always been really massaging this and really trying to learn what are best known methods and what are, reflecting on what are other design firms doing that I've, really admire. But we've always really kind of operated on more of a flat fee structure. I've found that has been more of an enjoyable experience for our clients to really understand what to expect and what their billing schedule looks like with us. And it's been really, again, just being a data person, it's been really important for me in order to be able to do that, to really have a very clear understanding of where our hours are going at every project. So we have years and years worth of data that shows us like how much did we spend at each part of the process. So that's been helpful. And so I do establish that, our flat fees based on that historical data, but it also is very clear within, and I have this conversation with the client, like, here's what this also covers, right, from a scope perspective, right? So, and that's kind of where I was explaining with the process. It's very clear on what are those deliverables that is included in that flat fee structure. Includes a certain amount of project management hours, different site visits. Of course, we want to be at all the critical site visits, plumbing, electrical, roughing, and just be there really supportive. So it does outline exactly what we will be delivering. I think where it gets tricky is that if the project goes sideways or if there's anything, as sometimes, they may need more help or they need more revisions or, we are on site a lot more. I really have to evaluate that and say, okay, do we need to approach the client, and have these conversations on, adding additional hours, or is this something that, we want to cover because it's, a customer service thing. So it's a constant challenge. I'm not going to lie. It's been tough to really hone that in. But we're continuously reviewing our data and just continuing to get better and ensuring that that's really clear. But I think clarity and transparency up front with our clients has helped it. And it seems to go pretty well for every project. So.
Yeah, it's tough because in so many ways you're trying to vet so many different parties, right? I think,
Yeah.
for us as, business owners, you're trying to vet your client first and foremost, right? And make sure,
Mhm.
they understand the value that you're proposing and, have appreciation for your craft and, the time and effort putting in. Not every client's going to really understand what you're dealing with day to day, Kirsten. And I think,
Yeah.
GCs are the same and you're trying to vet and you only have so much power, right? I mean, just like
Mhm.
me, there's only so much power that I have over the design team. There's only so much power you have over the builder. And
Right.
so you're
Right.
you're trying to navigate that where you're keeping an open communication dialogue, but at the same point, you're looking out for your client. I mean, that's why they hired you.
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
it can
Yeah.
add to the tension of each project depending on performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're really, and I think hopefully you saw this too, as in some of the projects we've worked on together, but, we're just really also looking at the partners that we work with, and I want to say picky, but we do, because we hold ourselves to such high expectations, we also want to work with the best and we want to make sure the client has an amazing experience overall. And I think that the best partners that we work with just have common goals in mind, and they, there's no ego. It's just very like, we work together, like it's important for us that, we look to our build partners as the experts, especially within the execution. And so just having that behind the scenes communication too with our partners, just to really set the project up for success and talk about, just be transparent and, what does our process look like and what is included in our client's package, and just really kind of coming to like a common ground on like what those boundary conditions are, but also like how can we work best together to kind of get it to the end, so that ultimately the client has a great experience, but we also have a great experience working together. So.
What's interesting about your story is I think, not, as you mentioned, not every designer starts in interior design, right? Some do, some know from early on, they go to design school, they've been successful. We see a lot of designers that, are in a different position. I think it's pretty rare, at least from my knowledge, to know a lot of designers that maybe have an MBA, this very structured financial background and coming into design, because there's it's so unique. How did you know that you had this talent? And here you are, on sabbatical at Intel, and you're completely switching industries. Like, it's very extreme because you're going from, as you mentioned, right brain, left brain. Like, these are two completely different aspects of.
Sure. Brad, honestly, I would say that I've always enjoyed, I think early on as I was younger, I kind of have, without getting into the background of my life, I definitely think I clung to order, driving some order and in chaos. And I think just, I always found a lot of joy in just making my room or my house, feel as like a safe haven, if you will, or a safe place to come home to and just enjoy. And so I don't know if I necessarily knew early on that I wanted to be a designer, but I think just through really finding my passion, as I was exploring different avenues, I was able to, just really kind of go after that. But I also feel like now, as I've grown my business and leveraged and brought in new, employees through the years, I've really kind of gotten back to more of the business side again. I feel like this is really where my strength is, and in the operations and, just all the different factors that come with running a business. And I really am so thankful for such a great team that cares so much about what they do every day. And they're really able to work on the design side. I'm still much involved, but it's been cool to see that even though like my background is different and I went from, business and Intel and MBA to now running a creative side of the business, I still feel like that structure and what I learned has now helped my design team run more, efficiently and more. It protects that creative side, and they can really shine, and I can really enjoy the business side too, and running that. So hopefully that helps answer your question. But it's like I feel like I went to an extreme, but I'm also really getting to live my passion, not only doing what I love, but also to still have the business side of it. And so it's kind of getting the best of both worlds, if that makes sense.
What have you learned from, your time at Intel to now being a business owner as far as hiring, company culture? How has that become refined? How has that had an impact on you and in your internal, hiring process?
Yeah. So I think I need to be careful about this because, and I don't know if your company, you guys go through something, but it's funny because I had some, Ryan, my husband, and then also we've had some other coaches kind of look at our hiring process, but they were like, I don't know if you've ever done the DISC model. It's DISC, and where you kind of fall, and I'm very high C, which is like very conscientious and structured. No, go figure, right?
Yeah, go figure, right?
So, but what was funny is we've done some DISC profiles for across the team, and what do you think everyone else is falling into? The C's. So for some reason, I must be really drawn to those that are like, hey, I'm structured, I'm organized, so it's, I feel like that has been a little bit of a guiding force of just really understanding our core values and what we stand for and what we want our team to represent. And, with all the different factors that are really important for my business. But it's been interesting because it also has shown me that I really, there's some value in also looking beyond just like-minded individuals. Right. And so, so I think it's led to our success, and it's definitely been important to me. I never really knew early on that I was going to be running a team. Not that we're huge, but we're still a team of 8, and that's, it's a fairly good size. And I never thought I would be managing that many people and leading that, because wasn't necessarily a direct manager until I was an operations manager, but I didn't have direct reports. So this has been new to me. However, I think what I learned early on in order to really grow is through leverage, right? You can't do it all, and you have to learn what you're good at, where do you want to spend your time, and where do you need to bring in help. And so I think learning early on to leverage, and that meant through hiring strong individuals, and then also just really looking at what are our core values and where do we want to really bring in the right talent in order to help us get to where we need to be. So,
yeah, you think about how hiring can create freedom. It's interesting you use the term. You said, that you can grow through leverage. And, I think that's an interesting philosophy because, like, I love physics, like our physics and calculus, like I'm kind of math brain. So like those are my favorite courses, in high school and college.
Awesome. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I know. And I appreciate that structure side. But I mean, when you think about lever, right? Big enough lever, like you can move very heavy things, right? And we see that just, but and as you apply that to hiring, to company culture and people, like as you mentioned, if you're hiring people that are structured and you are obsessed with structure, that's going to create, to your point, leverage. It's going to create opportunity. It's going to create freedom in so many different ways.
Yeah.
How do you?
I want to ask you. Oh, I was going to say, I'd love to ask you a couple questions.
Sure, fire away, please.
Can I?
I know I've been hammering at you the whole time.
No, you're fine. I just would love to learn more too, just because I know that you also, you where you're at within the level of your company. It's been really cool to see how you've grown through the years, because I feel like I remember sitting down with you early on in my business at your office, and I wasn't really sure what my next steps were. Yeah, it was a while ago, and so it's just been really impressive to see your growth and how and so I'm proud of you. And that's just, and I can say that because I remember we were, kind of still early on in that. So, but, how do you feel like, because I've been talking a lot about systems, processes, and things, how do you feel like your approach to building has maybe changed from your early on projects to now? And have you seen, similar to like your approach? Because I think you guys are one of the best, and you run a really tight ship as well. And I know you've said it's through the strength of your own team as well. But how has your approach changed from maybe early on to where you guys are at now?
Yeah, I think it's a very insightful question, Kirsten, because the thing is, when I look at, processes, I feel like today I have a much different opinion on it than I did early on in my career. And the reason being is, for me as a builder, I think it's two ways. One, if you don't have good processes, it really creates, a lack of trust with the client. Right. It creates a lot of frustration. I've seen where projects go south, and it's because we didn't have structure. So where I've had projects not, go in the outline they showed us, because there's things that we could see the flaws we had in our process. And I think a second aspect to that, going back to the hiring and company culture side, is you lose, there's times where you may have the right person that you hire, so you get the right person on the bus, but they're in the wrong seat, or they just can't even find a seat on the bus because you don't have enough processes to retain them, and they hop right off. And so what I've seen is, there's times in my career where, I was maybe creating stress on my team because I didn't have the processes in place to help them perform in their role. And so that led to frustration from their side, maybe frustration that they're carrying into their personal life. And so, over the years, I've seen where companies become very successful, and business owners is they really understand those processes and what it can do to onboard and retain and keep people and bring them into, a business that they can actually now use their powers, and their talents and their creativity. Because what I find is when you have that synergy, when you are operating under systems and you start hiring good people, it's not even a sense of competition, but it's kind of leveling up, where you start seeing so many of them come with creative ideas and ways to better the process, and this collaboration. And so it's not really like, hey, I'm trying to politically be elevated on the depth chart or organizational chart over somebody, but I really care about how we're operating as a business, and I feel we can do better. And so I've just seen over the years so many great ideas from our team members, because we have kind of a base layer. And I've seen how that stress of the client gets alleviated. Now, again, we're not perfect. We have, things that go wrong. It's just part of it. But I know that any client coming through the funnel today, and any employee that we hire, is going to have a much better experience than 2019 AFT or 2021.
Yeah. I love that. And I can so relate to all that you just said. And I think what I've seen, even just like what you've shared on, of course, through your social media, but also just knowing your employees, is just like the culture that you've cultivated as well, as far as like everyone, ideas matter, and just the continuous like improvement mindset. Like I've seen that you guys have, how do you approach a problem? It's not all the same way. I remember there was some type of exercise that maybe Spencer led, where it
Yeah.
was like, and that was really cool to see, as far as, there's so many different ideas and you can get to the end result in different ways. But, how do you drive those standards and how do you continuously improve? But that's really cool to hear, because I can relate to a lot of what you just said there, as far as just like onboarding and also just empowering your team, right? Having that base layer, but then making sure that, it's cultivated in culture to really drive a better experience overall for your
Well,
clients.
and I want you to think about this, because you made a comment earlier about, core values, like what you want to
Mhm.
represent in your business and how you
Mhm.
hire people that align with that. And so I want you to answer your core values. I'll go first. I'm not going to name all 11 of mine. We have 11 that we speak
Uh-huh.
to all the time. But two things that I find myself pushing a lot on our team. Of course, we have some with just aesthetics, site cleanliness and
Mhm.
communication and things. But two that I find us focusing on the most are, one, being a good steward of our clients' investment, because I
Mhm.
think it's really important that we don't become numb to cost. It can
Right.
happen on an expensive home, so we have to be very sensitive to always be guarding that client's investment. But I think one of the biggest things as well is, we have trust and value the design team. And I think this is really important because, I have a lot of respect for architects, for interior designers,
Mhm.
specifically interior designers, because you're trying to balance a lot of egos. You're trying to balance
Mhm.
budget. There's so many, designers have really been a key to my success as a business owner and as AAT, like at AFT.
Mhm.
I would tout that a lot of our success is because we've been fortunate to work with great design firms that
Mhm.
allow us to build these incredible homes in a good time frame. It helps us track budget better, and
Sure.
of course a marketing strategy, right? And so these are two things where, I hope that all my team has respect and is courteous and not throwing our designers under the bus and communicating with them. And
Mhm.
something you have to remind them, because I think, human nature, you have this defense mechanism
Sure.
where you immediately want to blame someone. Well, so
Mhm.
and so didn't do this, or they didn't give me this information, and
Yeah.
as opposed to saying, "Hey, time out, let's figure this out." And
Mhm. Yeah.
but as far as for treasure in the detail,
Mhm.
what are those core values that that are really important to you that you're trying to, impress upon your people?
Yeah. And just really quick, as you were talking about that, I mean, like, as I've worked with you and your team, especially I was very close with your team,
Hmm.
I think that was highly evident, right, in the projects that I worked on with you. It's just, again, just that team, that partnership with the design firm. Like, I never felt like I was just an outsider, or that, there was, even if there were things that happened, of course, there's always challenges in projects, right? It's just inevitable, but it's like how you get through it together. And just, so I do commend you for the culture that you've set and those core values, because it's clear that it's being exemplified through the company. Because every employee that I had interacted with, I never felt like, you know, if a challenge came up, like, oh, we're going to blame, or it was just always like, how are we going to get to the solution, right? And for the client. So I really appreciated that. But yeah, I think we have similar core values, but we have, I mean, some of them that I would highlight is like highest standards. So we hold ourselves to the highest standards, not only internally, but how we present ourselves to our clients and our partners. And just I will say I also have two core values that are very much on processes, but it's continuous improvement and efficiency. So just always constantly learning. Like, I don't think we'll ever fully arrive where we're going to be the perfect firm, but we want to just learn every day and just be a little bit better every day. So I say that that's definitely one that is a high one. And then team orientation, really around, like, we're really not about egos. I mean, yes, we might have, managers in our company and people that are just coming in, but, um, everybody matters, and nobody's higher than the other. If someone, if I need to go sweep something at a client's home to
Hmm.
get it ready for a reveal, I'm going to do that, right? You don't. So it's really, really important to me that my team acts that way, and that they bring that, that's through our culture, just so that it's it's a good experience, not only internally, but that everybody's kind of operating on that same level as we're interacting internally and then with our clients and our customer or our partners. So those are some of our core values as well.
Those are incredible. How have you, continuing education, trade shows, what have you find productive for you to, enhance your knowledge in the space, whether it be construction related, whether it be design related, products, materials?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, this is very important. And while I may not have the design like degree, if you will, I do, I have had trainings and I definitely am, I've had different experiences there. And then every designer that comes into our firm is required to either go through some type of technical training or they're coming in with an interior design degree. So I do want to clarify that because sometimes they're like, you have a business background, you didn't go through design school. But so anyway, just to clarify that. But yeah, I think, of course, when budget allows, but I think, our goals are always to go to, our markets. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the trade shows and markets that happen throughout the industry, like the High Point market. We have the,
Mhm.
the Las Vegas market that's closer. We've been to KBIS, which is really interesting to see more on the construction side and for the build side. So I would say continuous improvement goes right in hand with continuous learning. And,
Yeah,
I even, encourage my team if you want to, we're really trying to embrace AI right now and learning how we can use it to our advantage. It's not
smart.
going anywhere. It's only going to
Right.
help us be more efficient. And so I'm taking some training on that right now. And I really want to roll that out to my team so that they can learn how to really kind of use it to how we can, be better and more efficient, but also deliver some, better results for our clients. So very, very big on that. But I would say definitely through trade shows and different, learnings throughout the year. We also really encourage them to get out even in the local community. I mean, there's different things that are happening, at the Scottsdale Design District that we'll go
Mhm.
out and we'll do like team learning days where we're just, getting more familiar with the available products that are out there, different showrooms, and just really kind of embracing that. It not only helps with team culture and having fun together, but also just to continuously get out there and learn and, learn more about how certain things work. And I think it's also talking to our construction partners, not having an ego. Like we really look to you guys as like, yes, we might have an idea, but it might not be able to be executed or, we really strive to learn and understand the why behind things and how I've learned so much through this career and it's been amazing, but it's because you have to have a mindset where that's always open to learn. Right. And so I think it's just even talking with our partners and really being on site and understanding why something works a certain way or why, the why behind it. Because that's just going to help elevate us even more to understand as we move forward with our projects. So I would say those are some things.
I love that because, I think the questions is underrated. I know early in my career, when I was young, starting out of college, it's like you don't want to seem that you're uneducated or
Mhm.
that you don't know what you're doing, right? Because you
Yeah,
feel maybe this imposter syndrome in a way.
sure.
But what's interesting is I've found that, questions, whether it be to designer, to architect, to trade partners, I mean, there's so much information in it they have, and it's so
Mhm.
informative. And I found that over the years, like, those partners of ours don't get offended when you ask them.
Yeah.
They appreciate you wanting to understand more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. I think we sometimes get scared that like, oh, I don't know that, but I actually think people appreciate it more of saying like, hey, can you help me understand this? And it just kind of helps you to, it's just that authenticity, if you will. So,
Well, and you mentioned it was funny because you alluded to this in a way just a minute ago, speaking about how, yeah, maybe it might bring fear to people that you don't have this design background. You didn't go to college for design, and you have this business background. But what's interesting about that is, in fairness to you, I've known some incredible trades that are
mm,
skilled at what they
right.
do and
Sure.
terrible at running their business and the operation side.
Sure.
You think about that aspect,
Yeah.
and really, it's unfortunate because you know, in the end, I've had a few trade partners, fail as a business, file
Mhm.
bankruptcy, close shop,
Yeah.
and that's really put me in a really bad spot. It's put my clients in a bad spot. And so there's definitely a lot of value to any business owner that really is trying to understand their business and operations and
Mhm.
cost,
Mhm.
because yes, the skill set is very important. But in many cases, it's the operation that's more because there's a lot of
Mhm.
people that rely on that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I have seen that too, unfortunately, through my, the years working. I mean, we've worked with a lot of wonderful construction partners, even or other trades, but, um, again, just when we would be working together, it's hard when you are holding yourself to a standard and then your construction partner or whoever the trade may be isn't necessarily running their operations. Like I think it's sometimes a struggle with like customer service and just even just having processes in place if that's not how your mind works or you're trained that way. And so you could be excellent at your trade, and that can even be within the interior design side. You could be so talented in the design, but you really need to have that, that structure and those operations and those processes in place. Even if you're not good at it, have someone come in and help you and make sure that that it's in place. Because I think those are the ones that really survive and they kind of take it to the next level. You kind of have to have both, right? So,
Couldn't agree
and that's
more.
why I'm grateful. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're gonna say you're grateful for what?
No, that's why I'm so grateful for my team too, though, because I'm just like, I never am like, oh, treasure on the detail is because of Kirsten. No, treasure on the detail exists. And that's actually why I also named it that way. And I have it also is a little bit of a personal nickname, but when I want people to think of treasure in the detail, I want them to think of, all the players that are on the team, and then the ones that really kind of help, the clients feel that experience, right? That they are going to be cared for. Yes, it's beautiful design, but it's just like, how did we get there too, right? And it's a team. It takes a village, and it takes our team to kind of get projects from start to finish. And that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, is just being able to be part of each of these women's lives and men's lives that have been in our company. I've never thought it was going to be a leader. And I think it's been really cool to see the talent and also the, just being part of their journey, as they really are what treasure in the detail has become today. So.
I love that you touch on that, because I've known you, as I mentioned, 8 or 9 years. I don't know. We go back pretty far.
Yeah.
And when I've, knew your company name and your Instagram handle and treasure in the detail, as an interior designer, of course, I'm thinking, yeah, I mean, it has to do with your design aesthetic and the details.
Sure.
Details matter. But,
Yeah.
our conversation today is like change that opinion, because,
Mm.
you've really conveyed, how much structure that's your passion,
Mhm.
right? Structure and
Yeah.
systems and process. And so when you think about treasure in the detail, yeah, you could take it from maybe, again, not to be offensive, the shiny object, right, in this finished
Sure.
home.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
when you speak treasure in the detail, I mean, this is a whole organic thing. Like, this is detail in the
Right.
process, detail in the people, detail
Thank you for
in,
recognizing that too. It's going to
yeah,
make me
it's,
like tear up, but I'm like,
yeah,
it's finally like hit
yeah,
home,
it's
or not
clicking.
hit home, but like it's
Yeah,
just cool to see it come full circle, because
yeah,
you're spot on. That's what I meant. Yeah.
yeah. It's meaningful to your entire operation and every detail of
Yeah.
what you do, not just the end result that people may see on Instagram.
Thank you. You nailed it.
Well,
Just
yeah, hey,
kidding.
that kudos to you for sharing that. From a
Yeah.
marketing perspective, your business development, where do you find your clients? Where are
Mhm.
where are the inquiries coming from?
Sure. It's a great question. I think over the years it's changed. I think earlier on in my career, Instagram, and you probably know this, like I feel like 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, Instagram as an example, social media was just, and it was different. I don't know, the algorithm, maybe just the way that you could reach people. I mean, you could get thousands and thousands of likes on a post and not even really be
Yeah.
doing anything. And now it's like, it's harder, and it's just constantly shifting. And so I think historically we were a lot more heavily reliable early on social media, and that still is certainly a referral program for us today. But I think what I've learned in the last year or couple of years is really just about the partnerships. I mean, we have a lot of repeat customers that come in, and that's great, but it's not a reliable funnel, because you don't your clients are not always redoing their homes every year, or building new homes every year. So it's been wonderful to see that, but I think it's really been about the partnerships. That's one thing with Ryan coming on into my company, is just his
Hmm.
background in business development and just his leading of teams, and kind of his marketing side. Like it's about the relationships, right? And just finding like-minded partners that are really have the same goal in mind, and ultimately want to deliver an amazing experience for their clients and for their individual teams. And so I would say that's something we've been really focusing on this last year, is not just on like, oh, how do we get that next client? Like, we're really about like, let's build a really strong foundation. And that's not just what is treasure in the detail offer, but it's like, let's come together as a joint team with the best partners out there to really just be ready and flexible so I would say we are starting to, from a marketing business development side, is really focusing on that and building those really strong relationships and, that cross referral program, if you will. And I've seen some great wonders with that. So
How's that been bringing Ryan in?
it's good. I mean, he's still very part-time, so I will clarify that. And oh, by the way, I was going to say, my daughter is like, please say hi to Brad and make sure to call me out. So Riley, I know you never met Riley, but she wanted to make sure I mentioned her. So
That's cute.
but
That's
yeah,
so cool.
so I know I was like, maybe she can pop in and say hi. But
Yeah.
it's been great. Honestly surprising though with Ryan, because at first we were like, we're just so different. We're very I don't know. We just have we're just different. And so we weren't sure how it was going to be working together, like, honestly. But after a couple of months, we both were like, wow, we were actually like pleasantly surprised, because I think we have different things to offer, and we're very respectful of each other. And he's like, you're nicer to me when I'm working for you than you are at home. He said that like one time. He was like, you were listening to me. And I was like, I know. But
That's actually funny.
it's been fun. It's been really good. And I'm excited to see what's next, whether it's, continuing to grow this business. We've talked about potentially opening some different, some other businesses as well. So we're excited for what's ahead. But I do think we're a really strong team, and that's huge. So that's been really cool to see.
That's amazing. I mean, because sometimes, you think about, okay, if I'm working with my spouse, what are the boundaries? How do we set expectations? Because now you're, it's hard. You're, date night, you go out and you're like, okay, well, we're talking about work,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
to create those things.
And I'm always talking to him about business before he started with me. Like, he'd be my sounding board, but now he'll be like, okay, so, I talked to so-and-so, like, he'll come home and be like, I spent some time at AFT and I talked to these guys, and he'll be telling me all about it at night. And I'm like, okay, we need to no more business talk right now. I'm tired. Let's just eat dinner. So it's funny how it's been kind of cool to see his side come out and just the passion for it. So, but
well, it's addicting, right? Because I mean, when you're living it, and that's why, anytime you meet a small business owner, which you and I are, right? You just have this admiration, because even without saying anything, and we operate in a different business per se, but there's still a lot of similarities. It's painful. There's a lot of things that are painful. They're difficult. There's stresses. And so, for someone that really cares about, what you really convey, it's not just about profitability or creating a living. There's a lot more to the depth there.
So
and, it's very admirable.
Thank you. Yeah, no, same to you. And I really resonated with what you said on another podcast, when you were saying it can feel lonely at the top, and it can feel, and there's so many behind the scene pressures, and, but you have to have that support system in place, whether it's through a spouse, whether it's through your friends, whether it's through, I just think that it's not easy running a business. And I think that, the strong ones survive, but it's also just, being authentic and just being vulnerable when you need to be, and just really just giving it your all, and just remembering why you're doing it. And I did want to ask you too, because I know you've built some beautiful homes and built such an amazing business, but what are some things that you're most proud of outside of just, the homes that you've built? I mean, I'm sure I know family is really important to you, but
yeah, I love that question. And I hope this doesn't come the wrong way if I have a client listen to this, but the funny thing is I tell them, I say, AFT is about building people, and we build homes as a side gig, right? And I don't advertise that. I've probably never said that in public or on the podcast. So, but I really feel that way. And so when I look at Joy, and, whether it's seeing my kids, I have 5 daughters and a son, and it's fun to see my older 2 daughters who are out of high school now, one's getting married, and seeing her and her career flourish, and how organized she is with her budget and her credit score. And you see they're planning to buy a house, and, they're so responsible. And my other daughter, who's she's tutoring, she's doing pole vault in college, she's getting incredible grades. And so to me, it's seeing them kind of take off is very awesome as a father, right? But I think seeing my employees, and I've had some great ones over the years with me that have left, and to see them be successful. I've seen other builders that have been in our mentorship programs and things we've done in the industry, and see them, that their careers take off. And of course, my team here, to see them take ownership. I just, to me, it's never been about money. I think anyone that knows me knows that's the case. I just, I love people. I love seeing people succeed. And so I try to operate that way. and at least instill that in them, and so that they feel the same, so that's
Mhm.
definitely my passion for sure.
I do. I mean, it's very evident to me, and I'm not just saying that. I think that that's a big differentiator for you. And, I think, we're all obviously running our business because we need to take care of ourselves and our
Right,
families and,
right.
and be, have an income. But I think it's, like you said, I think your authenticity and about being about people, and the money will come, but if you don't have that as a foundation, like, and that's everything else doesn't matter, so I appreciate that. And I think that's one thing that I want to set my business apart is, yes, like, I want to run a successful firm, I want to be profitable, I want to be growing. However, to me, it's more about like what impact did we make, not only internally, but on our customers and just their experience. And it's like we're creating homes for people, and that's where they're living with their families and just, escaping the craziness of the world. Right. And it's just, at the end of the day, if we can make that impact a positive one for people, like, that's really what matters. Right. So,
Hmm.
so I appreciate that.
What keeps you up at night?
Yeah. What doesn't? I've been not
Yeah.
sleeping the last like several
Why is
years.
that? Is it our age or what? Like, I'm not.
Yes, of course it is. But no, I think it's just, I think it is, just, if we're just talking about, like, it's not about money, but at the same time, like, you're as a high achiever, and that's who I am. Like, that's just built in my blood. Like, I'm always like, how do and, I just want to be there for my employees. I want to take care of them better. I want to make sure I'm growing as a company. And, I think there's times where you have years that are really great, and there's times that, or even months where it's a little bit more challenging. So I think as a business owner, you're always thinking about, conversations with your employees, or how did the conversation with the client go, or how are we going to hit this goal, or how are we going to, make sure we're bringing enough into, because it is really important to me that I'm taking care of my team, and I'm always wanting to figure out how do we improve that experience for our team as well. So I would say things like that. I'm just constantly replaying things in my head, or just always thinking about hitting our goals, and it does keep me up at night.
Oh, I can understand that clearly. What do you do for fun?
I do really enjoy. I found a love for working out, so I have been doing that for several years now, and have really felt it does help really release the stress. I know you can appreciate that as well. And then I really just enjoy being outside. Like, I love live music. I'm actually going to the Innings Festival tonight, and I don't know if you know anything about that, but it's in
Mm.
Tempe. So they're playing Goo Goo Dolls and Mumford and
Oh,
Sons are
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
tonight, and then so I love just just being outside, listening to live music. We have a little house in Oregon too, and so I love kind of escaping there during the summers on the coast, and just enjoying the fresh air and just kind of a slower pace. So I'd say a mix of those type of things are what really brings me joy and just helps me unwind.
Well,
What
maybe
about
let's.
you?
Well, yeah, I will say I'm envious. In the summer you can sneak out to Oregon. That's beautiful. I mean, you can't get much better than the coast of Oregon in the summer.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's same. I've found exercise is great. I think for the stress of being in our business,
Mhm.
feel more energy, more alert, which is what I need. Very involved with my kids. They love
Mhm.
Disneyland, so we'll do that on occasion.
Yeah,
People
I
probably see
love
that, but
seeing it, and you share it,
yeah.
and it's so cool. I'm like,
I
that's
do. We do. But they love to travel. So we try to travel as much as we
yeah,
can. And,
yeah,
sometimes my schedule can be pretty busy. So it's nice to find
sure,
time where, we
yeah,
have time to travel, make those memories. And of course, I still am active, basketball and
mhm,
golf. And,
yeah,
here on the podcast, it seems to be never a dull moment, but I appreciate that. It definitely,
mhm,
um, time goes by too fast is what I realized. So just trying to optimize
yeah.
as much as you can.
Well, it seems like you balance. I mean, I know it's always hard to say like what everyone's behind the scenes are, but from what you portray, like, it seems like you're balancing. You do find family really important, to spending time with your kids. You can tell that that's really important to you, and you are pulled in a lot of different directions. I know that feeling, and so I think it's just remembering your why, and like what's important to you every day, and not letting that. That's one of the biggest things that I've had to learn, right? Is like just really trying hard every day to remember your why and what you're doing. So,
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Kirsten, you've been
mhm.
amazing. You're so talented. And again, for anyone that wants to go look up the hashtag worth the wait, you'll see her incredible work with us at AFT. You've done phenomenal job, great business owner. And for those listening, where can they find you?
Yeah, so of course, we have a website online at www.treasureinthedetail.com, and then our Instagram at treasureinthedetail. We also have a local studio here in Mesa, Arizona. So, yeah, thank you for having me, though, Brad. Like I said, it's just been so fun to talk to you today, and you're just been fun to be open with each other, and just very, I just really admire you too, and yeah, I just appreciate you very much. So,
Well, the
thank
feeling
you.
is mutual. Thank you.